Welcome to the Parable Arrows podcast, where we wrestle with story to seek deeper truth. We believe that engaging with the art of the world can help us discern more of what God, as the true artist, is trying to reveal in the beauty of his story. Join us as we discuss movies, ideas, and practice engaging with art, God's word, our thoughts, and each other. Hey, today our subject is It's a Wonderful Life from 1946, starring Jimmy Stewart. My name is Femi and I'm here with my co-host Josh. Hey, Josh, how are you?
Yes, sir. What's up?
So before we get into the movie, this movie deals with suicidal ideation. So if you or a loved one is struggling with these ideas, you might want to take a pause on this, but please talk to a loved one or call either 988 or 1-800-273-8255. We want you all to stick around. So, being that in 2023, this is the Christmas season, we're in the month of December, we still feel obligated to cover like a holiday movie. And as we enter into it, one of the lessons we get is from It's a Wonderful Life. Josh, you've seen It's a Wonderful Life before now?
I don't know how many times. Very many times.
It's a classic.
My lips bleeding, Bert. Like,
oh, well, what can I say? We're going to do Jimmy
Okay.
Stewart impressions the
Mary.
entire episode.
It's me, Mary.
Clarence.
Yeah.
So if a person faced with these huge odds of his story thinks he knows how it's going and what's changed or what would have been better to avoid a pain that he currently faces, little does he know there is more than one story about him that he can't see and he doesn't experience fully, yet they matter in a huge way. So we're going to get into it. For new listeners, we appreciate you listening with us. We have this sort of kitschy breakdown called SMART, which is summary, message, who we think the audience is, rethinking what we've seen, and asking some questions, and a touch of theology, a little sprinkle there. So let's get into it. All right, and get into the summary. We've gotten a lot shorter at these. We're going to keep getting better at them. But spoiler alert, George Bailey finds himself in a Christmas Carol-esque situation as the building and loan gets hit with a run, and George realizes they won't be able to rectify the books and everyone on the market. He gets extremely depressed. Billy misplaced a deposit amount, and now they're liable for fraud. So he feels he hasn't been able to reach his dreams. He's made his sacrifices that have put him in this unfortunate position where he's locked in this downward spiral to ruin. As he contemplates ending it all, an angel named Clarence shows George two versions of his life, where George's existence saved his brother, who went on to save more as a war hero, prevented the town from being overrun by a greedy bank operator, stopped an accidental medical death, and kept the memories of his family intact. So George decides to continue living and is greeted by the generosity of the town, who also realizes how important George is and his presence is for everyone. Finally, Clarence, who as an angel didn't have his wings, gets them for helping George come to the realization of the idea that he is, in a way, the richest man in town. All right, let's get into the message. So, Josh, what did you think the message of the movie was?
All right. Of course, we have like 50 messages that we could go through, but I think one that came to mind in this season of life that I'm in right now is that we often in community wait too long to tell people how much they've impacted us or what they mean to us. So I recently have been trying to be better, whether it's with my students or with coworkers or, friends, or even past teachers or influences, just letting them know how much they've impacted me. Just because I know for me right now, I didn't realize how hard it is to be in a position like teaching where so much of the work you do it's not tangible metrics, right? Like you're not trying to raise, the budget by a certain amount of money. You're not trying to, get a certain number of followers or whatever. You're doing this very internal. You're hopefully doing work that is being cultivated internally by your students. And I think sometimes, when you have adolescents, like they don't necessarily know in the moment what you're trying to do or why you're trying to do it. And so that's required me to grow a lot in how I see other people and myself. And so I think thinking of George Bailey in this movie, I'm wondering what it would have been like if other people in the town had let him know before he got to that place of just being so hopeless, or like if there had been encouragers in his life, but also if he had actually seen all the impact that he was having and accepted that, and versus kind of being detached from it.
Yeah, that's what's up. Yeah, I think one of the messages I walked away with was all the small things you do in your life add up to your actual life,
Yeah.
not the big accomplishments you have. Even men who I look up to historically don't have an actual personal impact on my life. I respect them for accomplishing something in their life. And I also realize the accomplishment that they have for the people who are closest to them isn't the thing that people care about for them. Like any rock star, like their kids don't care they're a rock star, right? But other kids dream about being like their parents.
Yeah.
And so I realized that all the small things that, and we hear this a lot, like the small things of being there, showing up, being present, being consistent are way more important than, hitting a home run out of the park. However many people who have made it to like the pinnacle of whatever a thing is, but they're not the absolute best, and they get to live sort of a normal life of anonymity. How many NFL players can you really name? Like you can name the Hall of Famers, but there's a lot of other people who like they're just chilling. They made it there, and they might feel like they haven't achieved, but they've made it to this pinnacle. So I think that that's something that really impacts me. One thing with this movie, as I was doing some research too, I realized that this movie like did not do well initially.
Really? That's interesting.
I don't remember if it lost money, but it didn't do very well. Then the copyright or the trademark or whatever, it lapsed. And then it got to be streamed, or streamed today. It got to be picked up and syndicated
I'm streaming,
on TV
Bert.
shows. Right. For very, very little money. Right. Yeah. And so it already has its own sort of George Bailey-esque life of we're going to do this huge, big movie and it's going to be great. And we're going to get Jimmy Stewart and it's going to be amazing. And then it doesn't do well. And to the point where people forget about it. And then people remember like, no, these are all the things that this movie had to say. So I think it was sort of meta that this movie had that own sort of story in it.
For sure.
Do you agree with this message of like telling people thank you now, like going through and having sort of gratitude, as you mentioned? That was a big thing you took away.
Yeah, for sure. I think I do agree with it, with the caveat that what you're saying and what you're encouraging for someone is genuine, specific, and personal. I think there's a lot of language in the modern era about, like positive vibes and like be kind to everybody. And I'm like, yeah, but at some point that just becomes hollow and it becomes I think of like how, we're in the Midwest. So like the whole Midwest nice idea where it's like, it's not actually that you're nice. You're just kind of culturally in this sphere where you try your best not to like ruffle people's feathers or whatever. And like, that's very different to me than actually seeking someone out and saying, hey, when you came to me in this one moment when I was going through something and you did this or you said this specific phrase, like I haven't forgot that and this is like what it did. I think of how many people in the town like had that kind of story with George where he gave them, like grace with something that he probably didn't need to and maybe even put himself in a little bit of danger. But then because he did, it changed their lives forever. Or with his kids showing up and being there and like not pursuing these dreams. I'm imagining this movie being made in the modern era, and I'm imagining a spin where George Bailey ditches his family because he's like, well, I never got to live my dreams and screw you guys, and like self-love and self-care and all that stuff. So I think to see him commit to where he was at in the midst of what he was going through, I think I'm still curious what it would have been like for him to have heard some of those words of encouragement. But when you think of, for you, like those little things, like where do you think, or maybe some nuances of your agreement of like why you think that's valuable for us to take away?
I read a lot of, and by read a lot of, I listen to a lot of, because let's be real, I'm not flipping books open as much as I would potentially want to. Books on productivity and habit formation and how you can continue to put things around you that gear you and direct you towards your goals. And all of them are about small choices that you decide to make.
Mm-hmm.
They're not about, well, tomorrow, eat 100% clean, work out 5 times a week for a minimum of an hour and a half. Like, you and your spouse are on the exact same page with how you're spending your finances, no more, no less, all the time. Your work is going to be completely stable and never have stress anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Your kids are going to do exactly what you want them to do if you implement these plans. And
Mm-hmm.
the small presence of being there every single day, showing up and trying to make sure I'm giving giving the energy that I have that day to the good,
Mm-hmm.
even through yawning all the time, is part of what's building my life. When I look at my career and what I thought what it was going to be and what it is, which is two very, very different things,
Mm-hmm.
I still appreciate my career and I appreciate the people who I've known and what they've done for me and how they've supported us in certain things. I appreciate the knowledge that I've gained, and all of that's cumulative over a long time. It's never been something that I, came in and was a rock star, which we should probably stop saying for people in the first 3 months. And that will change what we, I think, view for each other as development. And what I expect of other people is not for them to be a shining light now. I give them more permission to take their time and show me that they're dedicated over time. And if they're just consistently swinging for the fences all the time, to use a baseball analogy, I know that some of that energy is probably not healthy, not only for them, but for the people around them. And yeah, there's some more can get into for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
As we get into some of the audience everything. So let's get into it. All right. So, Josh, who should watch this movie? Who should watch It's a Wonderful Life from 1946, starring Jimmy Stewart?
Everybody should watch this movie. I think this is a sorry, Clarice in the background, she laughs. Threw me off. I think this is a very family friendly movie. I think it's actually incredibly nuanced and ahead of its time in talking about mental health, specifically men's mental health. So I think this would be, especially amongst friends, like a church men's group or something, I could see this being a really, really awesome film to just talk about like the pressures of fatherhood or masculinity. And I think there's a lot of, I think even if it's kind of funny, like I know when we talked about Fight Club, like one of the themes we talked about is that idea of like not being emotionally in it. And, there's like this distance and detachment from our work and what we're doing. And I think that's the exact same thing that George Bailey's going through. But then he goes through this radical experience where now he comes out of that being like, I'm still in it and I'm still here and I'm still going to like serve and love my community and be appreciative of what I have. And so in a weird way, this is kind of like an answer. I didn't even think of that until just now, but this is kind of like an answer to the opposite of like what Fight Club is kind of suggesting in a few senses. So I think families with kids, great. Friends, great. Evangelistically, I think there's enough God references that, it's there, but it's not beat you over the head, like Pure Flick style. And I think even just the realness of like, the last time we watched this movie, I think was at a family Christmas. And I just remember it finally clicking where, I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is a movie about suicide. Like, and it's from, the 50s. Like that's pretty out there in a way. Like that is not a common reality. So I think just there's a realness in this movie that I think will connect with a lot of people, but is handled in a way that's very artful and isn't going to cause, I think, too uncomfortable of like situations for maybe kids who are younger and don't understand some of the decisions that are being made.
Yeah. I think because that you don't see the actual negative act that could have happened, it's really helpful for the audience, but that's really key for anybody who has, again, we said at the top of the episode, anybody who has any type of sensitivity around that topic. I completely agree with everybody watching it. It's a classic. If you're a cinephile, watch it. If you're a kid with your parents, just sit down for a little bit, watch the movie, tell your parents that this is weird, that it's in black and white, all the other stuff, right? I think
they have in color versions now.
Yes, I do know they have
can't complain about that anymore,
right.
Little kids who definitely listen to our podcast.
So it's one of those movies that hits everyone. I think exactly what you said. I didn't even think about the men's ministry piece, but that would be amazing for people to be honest about the struggles and not just telling everybody simple messages of what it takes to be a man, but what are the things that you're struggling with to be a man, and how can we support you through thinking through these in a way and seeing your value, and not doing it in an unhealthy way, but to just say you have helped a lot of people. You are engaging with a lot of people, and you can do more. The other thing that I feel at the beginning of the movie is when you do your best, or you try your best, or you didn't think you had any more to give, and something goes wrong, it's gonna be equally understandable that other people are gonna react and want to blame you. And I think everybody feels a moment in their life where it feels like there's just a barrage of people saying that you're not doing it well. You messed it up. You messed it all up. Yeah. And it helps you take a beat to realize, wait, they were probably also being a little bit emotional. I know that their relationship has been longer than that. Let me take a breath and let me figure out, like, what I feel now from that reaction is not necessarily true. So that can be really helpful evangelistically, and especially for kids. And then with your friends, especially if you're repairing a relationship. So I think that was really helpful. Just blanket sort of everybody saying everybody danger, you know?
Everybody. So. Definitely.
Cool. Let's get into Rethink. In our Rethink section, we ask ourselves some questions about the material. Josh, I'll let you kick it off first.
Sure. Yeah, so let me see here. So one of my questions, it's pretty directly stated, like both of my questions get to our idea of being honest with people and telling them what they mean to us. And my question is kind of straightforward for once. I usually I feel like I have 3 paragraphs of explanation before my question, but this time it's just, why do you think it's so hard for people to tell the people in their life who have impacted them that that's true, that they have done something for them or had an impact on them positively? Like, what do you think of all the reasons feeds into that?
My fast answer is we take them for granted. We take all the things that we have in our life for granted. For reference, for people who don't know, like, I'm sitting in a basement that doesn't have any like direct heat to it, and I am warm. Well, I'm wearing layers, but I'm warm. I have lights on. It is dark outside, and I feel comfortable. I got some food over there, got some water over there. I have plumbing, and as our standard of living rises, we expect things from our stuff. And I think that as there are more services and technologies that make life easier, we expect more from each other without expecting that of ourselves. And so when people do things that are genuinely kind, or even if they were normal back in the day, it was all expected for everyone to do so. We don't appreciate them anymore. They have gone from nice to normal to expected to that's what I need to be treated with, you know, and it's a loss, you know, for our relationships with each other. Yeah. That personally for me, it does have to impress me sometimes what somebody does. I have to feel it like differently. Oh my gosh, thank you so much for taking the time. Thank you for being so flexible. And I have to remember. So sometimes I give thank yous even, you know, I think the longest I've given is like 6 years after the fact. And I realized something. And I was like, oh, I need to thank that person. And I just thanked them via Facebook message. I doubt they ever even saw it. But it just takes a while to remember, oh, someone didn't have to do that. Someone didn't have to be that for me. And they were. And when you realize it, I think it's a really good practice to tell them immediately. And the same if you have a compliment for someone. It's like, man, I saw some people at the grocery store today and I was just like, man, I like your shoes. I like both of your shoes. Because you just don't know what day they're having. Just say something nice to somebody, as long as you're not creepy about it. Yeah. I then got in my car and left and didn't try to have a conversation. But just to make people feel good. I think that's one of the things that makes it hard, though, is we just are moving so fast and we expect so much. How about you?
Yeah, I think I definitely agree with that. As you're sharing, I think something else I'm thinking of is we practice what we want to get good at. And if we really wanted to get good at giving compliments and encouraging, then that means we have to do it a lot. And if we don't do it a lot, then guess what? We're not going to be encouraging and like looking for those opportunities to encourage. So I think it's pretty easy for us to be like, oh, the culture today, and, and kind of, get the old man yelling at the cloud kind of mentality. But I think sometimes people don't encourage each other, not necessarily because they like hate anybody, but they just why am I thinking of that? And I think to me, that has been a transformative spiritual shift that I've seen God do in me, is desiring, because that is not my nature. And as someone who struggles to receive words of encouragement, I can sometimes struggle to give words of encouragement. And so, sorry, my wife just that.
Me too.
She's like, and so I think that has been really challenging for me to realize that if I do want to encourage people like my wife or my students or my coworkers or my friends, then that means I have to, it's not just the act itself. I even in my own case have to deal with my own things, like feeding into those blockades that are keeping me from saying things. So I don't know, man, like it's hard to think like I wish our world was more encouraging.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not surprised that it's not. Like, that's not a, like, oh man, how did we get here? I think just very genuinely, imagine what a world would be like where people weren't giving each other like hollow compliments or like compliments to get a compliment, but it was just genuinely like, dude, like that was so cool that you did that. Like, man, like, thank you for doing that. Or like, dude, you have no idea that when you said this thing to me, that really uplifted me and was encouraging to me, and just the impact that has on both people.
Yeah.
One, the person to tell the truth, that really did resonate with me. And wow, I don't think I've sat with how much that moment you gave to me impacted me. And then for the other person, like you said, you don't know what kind of day they're having. You don't know where they're at emotionally to then receive that kind of sight from someone, specifically and personally, the ripples that can have to just energize them on whatever they're up to.
Yeah. I think, well, I'll save it because I read some of your next question, so I might save some of my answer. But get a habit of compliments for everyone could do a lot of people emotional good. So
do you want to jump to one of yours questions, or do you want to jump into that?
Sure.
The second one?
We'll jump to one of mine, and then I'll go back to yours.
Cool.
So mine does have a little bit of a paragraph, but George seems to regret seriously what he's doing and where he's going. When we're talking about regret, we're typically thinking of things that we wish we did or did not do in the past, or things we think would or would not have happened if they didn't happen, that things would be totally different. And so that could be someone's presence, someone's absence, a date, something with work, an artwork we create, a play on a field. Similarly, I've watched a few shows all the way through multiple times, and I never once have regretted watching those shows, but that's hundreds of hours of my life. So what is it that for us that you think are smaller decisions which make more of an impact? Why do we act like some of the moments of our lives are so much bigger or more important than they are? And why do we act like the small things don't add up?
Broski, this is a hard hitter because I think this is my struggle in everything. And this is me speaking for myself, so maybe someone hearing will resonate with it. But I think I very quickly lose steam if there isn't even the smallest of results. Like that just takes all the wind out of my sails. So like if I'm working on a story behind the scenes, like I have a novel I'm working on right now, and so much of me wants to just throw it all over social media and just like the outline and the concept and the all this stuff, because to even get people to say, wow, this sounds cool, but it's not done. It's not what I want. It's not anything substantial. It's just, I want the feeling that all this planning, all this organization, all this thought going into even the preparation to execute is worth something. And I think part of it is we've been I don't know by who or by what, but I think we've been trained to always be looking for those moments of growth. And until those moments of growth come, then there's no evidence that anything is like working. And so we're constantly looking for where's the evidence that the progress is happening, which I think is interesting because if you read scripture, very rarely does God ever promise any sort of very tangible, like outward transformation that he's like, yep, 3 months from now, you can expect that your whole life will turn around. And like, you know, it's just kind of like, nope, you're going to do the thing. You're going to commit to doing this decision every single day, every single moment, taking every thought captive. And that's kind of it. And you're like, frick, well, where does that take me? And he's like, I don't know. Like, well, he knows, but he's like, I'm not telling you.
To holy.
So
to holy. He's like, what does holy look like? It's like, your path looks different from everybody else.
it's like, you're going to find out, man. Like, but you got to walk it. So yeah, I think by that question, I'm really challenged to really think through why I'm so obsessed with results and like why I feel so demoralized if I'm doing, or if I have been doing something for a long time and I don't see change happening. Yeah. So I might have more to say on that, but I'd be curious to hear deeper from you, like what you've been observing, or if you have any examples from
I mean,
your
I feel
on
the
that.
same. I'm much better about it now because I think, especially in this last year, God has taught me a lot about slowing down and waiting for Him. But I think that that's a dopamine thing that we have now. Not that every positive feeling is dopamine, but we're addicted to scrolling, we're addicted to watching, we're addicted to consuming, which is one of the reasons we do this is, right, we know people like movies in general, maybe not movies from 1946, but people like movies and like talking about movies, and they can get a little bit of dopamine without having to accomplish more than connecting with another person. Right? Like you can connect with another person, and that value, that connection, that can give you enough plugins to last a lot longer than the next video on how to make, a croissant sweet, or how to make a croissant or a breakfast sandwich, or whatever the recipe video or workout video thing is that you're looking for, that hit to make you feel good or to affirm you. So social media is dangerous, I think, for that reason. It's not dangerous in itself, but how we use it and what it does for us and our brains can make us more like that. I feel the same way with the future planning, though, too, of if I am being consistent for a long enough time, I want to see the result. So I gravitate towards workouts where there are measurable improvements. And right now, because it's not lifting weights like it used to be, it's we have a rowing machine, and seeing the time go down for bigger and bigger distances is like helping me stay motivated. Like, okay, I'm doing it faster. All right, I'm going longer. Okay. Because it is so hard. And I think it should encourage everyone to set goals and smaller milestones. Yeah. But it's just a hard thing that we need to watch out for. I think it does get into your question, so I'll pass it back to you. Your second question.
Well, my second thought was, what advice will we give to people who feel like the work that they're doing isn't valuable, or that they've missed out on so many of life's opportunities? And I think, thinking back on past episodes talking about like Soul, for example, and thinking of George Bailey in this movie, and my thought, which I knew would get to me after you shared, was I wonder if one of the things that causes us to be so focused on the bigger important things is because that's the thing that everyone pays attention to. And when you're doing something small over a long period of time, there's a much more high likelihood that you're going to feel very stupid in what you're doing. And, in full honesty, like, man, you and I have had talks about, sitting and talking about movies, and we're like, does anyone care? Does anyone what are we doing this for? And there are real moments where, we're strategizing and talking about things and praying about big, ambitious things and putting in small bits of work over text message and Slack messages and, goofy social media stuff. And like, we're just trying, and we're like, fingers crossed, I guess. And there have been a lot of moments where it's been like, I feel like such an idiot because nothing is happening. And all my friends and family are watching nothing happen. And that I think is the hardest part for me, is feeling like, frick, like all this energy is going into what?
That's interesting. Yeah.
And so I think to that, even just, just I guess jump in to answer my own question. I think a question I ask my students often when we study Soul and Into the Spider-Verse is, who owns the definition of success in your head? And I think I haven't dismantled that other people hold the definition of success in my head. Not even that they have a specific definition, but until they say it's successful, it's not. So I think that would be my first tip. And like I said, I'll probably have more after you share, but I think my first tip is really taking a look at yourself and trying to dismantle, do I have someone else telling me in my life what's valuable? And if I'm honest, that's probably not God. And so if it's not, who is it? And why do I care so much about
their opinion,
their definition?
Yeah, that's really good. Man, there's so much we can talk even more, because we do sometimes offline. But I think the first advice I would say is the same thing: is who is saying that all those things need to be accomplished? Who is saying that all these things need to be done for your life to be valuable? Who is saying your life isn't valuable? Why do you believe someone saying your life isn't valuable? Have you asked me what I think about your life? Like, those are like just some basic questions. I get very Socratic about these things.
Yeah.
I have a bunch of questions, not because I'm trying to say you are wrong. I'm trying to get you to ask, and using your own logic. Do you think that the person who you held the door open for at the grocery store doesn't care? You think the person who you cleaned up after doesn't care? Real case in point, we were driving back from our date last Friday, and I there's a traffic sign that someone hit, probably drunk, and it's in the middle of the road. And we think we're going to clear it, so we slow down, and then it hits the front of our car. So I look behind me, I look in the rearview mirror, I look where Cass is driving. She's nervous. I hop out of the car, put it in park, hop out of the car, take the traffic sign, throw it into the median, so just nobody's going to hit it. Right? And I drive back, and I'm like, man, that at least someone else is going to hit it. Today, I was driving on the exact same road, saw the same sign that I moved out of the way on Friday. And I was like, I'm so grateful somebody moved it out of the road.
Yeah.
Right? But nobody other than me, you, and the people who will listen to this episode know that I moved it out of the road, right? Yeah. Everybody who's driven on that road since has not had that traffic sign hit their car or be in front of their car because I moved it. But I could say, well, nobody saw it. Nobody did anything about it. And I think that is trying to encourage people, you're doing small things all the time that you don't think matter because they're not making you a lot of money or they're making you famous. But your parents, for the first however many years of your life, kept feeding you as you disobeyed. I'm sure you did. They kept on loving you and giving you food. Yeah. And if they didn't, there's somebody else who encouraged you to the growth that you're in. So reminding people, which I think is why we're supposed to read scripture so much too, to remember God's character to an unfaithful people, is helping them to see, all the stuff in the past that has made me who I am, I don't have enough gratitude for. So it doesn't make me feel like I am the culmination of all those things that have happened to me. Yeah. It makes me feel like I am not yet at this person and their pinnacle, when that pinnacle of things also misses out on a whole lot of stuff that you get to experience. Only you know your wife like you know your wife. Only you know your mom and dad from being their son, and the son in birth order, right? So those are things that I think of why gratitude journals can be helpful for people, and a practice of slowing down to think and remember can make you much more grateful. And then when you start to create, you're not creating on anybody else's timeline. You're creating from an overflow and not for a reception. You're not creating for a result. So it's made me think of this could take many, many years. Is everything we're doing sustainable or are we chasing at the wind? And so it's made me feel more comfortable with being excited at all times when I get spare time to work or to write on this stuff. So I wish I had more, but that's just not the way the world works. And I didn't do stuff at 20 that I could regret to put us in that position. Yeah. Or I could just be I'm really grateful that we're in this position now. And the people who have been supporting and listening, support and listen. So.
Yeah. Yeah. When I think even as you're saying that too, that's George's symptom, right? Because he's so focused on what he thought was his result and he owned the definition of success. And it's very surreal to think about just thinking of my own life, like, okay, so George is thinking, man, my life was a waste because I didn't go travel. And I don't think he ever says, like, what was he going to do when he was traveling? Do you remember?
No, I don't remember.
Like, he wasn't like, I'm going to be a doctor traveling to, like, I don't think he says
No,
anything like that. And so,
no.
sorry, my wife corrected me. He wants to be an
Yeah.
engineer, I think. He wants to build things.
He
Anything
wanted,
else?
he wanted to do things. He did say he wanted to travel at some point, I think.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember. But he wants to give the people he cares about the world. He wants to be someone looked up to, which is the big thing,
Yeah.
right? We all want people to look up to us. And if nobody looks up to us, a lot of us feel empty.
But think of, and I think that's the deeper message of this film. That's another message of this film, is because this has been when I was at UW-Madison and I heard very tangibly God kind of work through my own thoughts to be like, I want to make people feel stuff. Like, it doesn't matter if I'm doing that on a cinema screen or in a one-on-one conversation or like making a music thing for myself. I am accomplishing that goal. And that goal is honoring to God in living that out. And I think maybe that's another piece of advice is have like a spirit-led personal mission for like what your life is about. And like, as long as you're doing that thing, like you're doing it, dude. Relax, take a deep breath. It's going to be fine. Cause I say that to myself literally because I think I get wrapped up in my own head of life doesn't look the way I want it to look right now or how I'm hoping it will look. And therefore, what have I done to like screw this up? And that's the lens that I'm seeing my life through is there's all these mistakes I've made to not get me where I want to be versus it just being like, no, you're just kind of living and just like keep going.
Yeah. I think of that with farmers in the old world of just they 6 days a week if they're Jewish and 7 days a week if they're not. They got to get up, milk the goats. After they milk the goats, they got to tend the field, capture whatever they can harvest from harvest time, sell it at the harvest time, figure out a way to store it before it goes bad, go home, do it again. And you can't really get famous like that, you know?
Yeah.
I think it's why some blue collar workers have a lot of pride. It's a little bit of resentment of like, why don't you appreciate what we do? Like we build your houses, we do your plumbing, we do like we make your roads, we fix your cars, we grow your food, and all you have to say is like demeaning stuff about how that work isn't, getting us on vacations to Bora Bora. Well, we sometimes like simple things, carpenters, like so. It should help us with all of our perspective of people and a theology of work in general to remember that it's not necessarily the action, but the attitude a lot of the time and the consistency of that attitude. There are a lot of people who are rich who I would not want to be friends with or know personally. Yeah. Just because their attitude is very, I don't want to use the word toxic. What do I want to use? Their attitude is not encouraging or edifying. It's blaming and self-aggrandizing. Yeah. You're in where you are because it's your fault. Yeah. Like, yeah, and I made some good choices, which meant I had to say no to some other things because of opportunity cost. So, like, to be faithful and be present with my kids and my family, I don't think it's wise for me to spend 12, 13 hours a day working. We're not in a financial position where that has to be the reality, so I should be present with them. Meaning I will not be rich by working in extra hours I don't need to work to make a side hustle grow. Like, I need to do those things. Yeah. But that's what I would say for encouragement. Yeah, for sure. We sort of talked through actually also one of my other questions. I'm watching time as well because shout out to people giving us feedback. You can give feedback too, parablearrows@gmail.com. The other question I had was sort of a lighter one. What do we make of Clarence?
He's a dweeb.
Is Clarence being self-serving to get his wings? The other idea that Clarence brings in place, which is a little more heavy, is the fact that he knew that George helping him would help George. He knew that if he jumped in the water, that George would stop thinking about whether or not he should jump in, see someone jumped in that needed help and go help.
Mm-hmm.
So it's sort of a two-part question if you want to take the joke part of the question
Sure.
or the heavier part of the question. The heavier part of the question that I think is just, it's so true if we think about people outside ourselves, we sometimes can help ourselves get out of ruts.
Yeah.
But
No, I will say I'll probably lean into the heavier side because actually I had some advice from my counselor who we were talking through, okay, what do you do or what should I do when I'm feeling like really down and frustrated or just like out of it? And he was like, well, because he also works at a school, and he said, well, sometimes, when I've just had a really long day with, middle schoolers and high schoolers or whatever, he's like, I'll go to the like special education room and I'll go like work with those kids, and like they give the best hugs and they're so like fun and jovial, and like he just says like every time he goes and spends time with them during the day, he always feels better and like more hopeful because it's just like the joy that he experiences like being around them and helping. And I think there is I don't want to say, like, how do I say this? There is something in being dependent upon that is good for us. And I don't know why. And I don't know that I have like a really deep answer why. I think that's one of the things that I'm trying to process. Like something Gloria and I joke about often is when she gets sick, I go into like Uber husband mode. And I'm like heating up the soup and getting the water and clean, like picking up and like it doesn't stress me out. It doesn't bother me. But then there are other times of life where like I have all the free time in the world. And she's like, hey, can you give me water? And I'm like, ugh. So there's like something strange about, I think, us needing to be dependent upon or like having people need us that is like good for us, and not in a unhealthy, like codependent kind of way, but just like George forgot that he had a wife and daughters and a community that like needed him, and that his absence would be a huge gap. And I think Clarence, also knowing George's character, that when push comes to shove, George is going to see someone else above himself. And like, that's the depth of George's character. It wasn't just like, oh, here we go, some idiot fell in the lake before me. It's his whole brain like shuts off and he's just like go mode. I got to help this guy. And I thought I read a verse about that somewhere, that like trial brings out true character. I think it's in Romans. I'll have to find it. I'll add it to our discussion outline sometime. But yeah. No, how about you? When you were coming up with this question, like, what were you thinking through?
Yeah, I mean, it's really funny. He's like, I want to get my wings, and I'm supposed to help. And obviously, that's not the air of Clarence. But I thought that part was funny. Just like, you got your wings, Clarence. Good for you. Good for you. Way to go. The helping people. I realized that if I feel in a funk, it is helpful for me to help somebody else, because then I don't feel useless. I think that when the media for, young adult men who are approaching middle age is telling them you're a failure, you're not achieving at some level, which 85% of them, just have things that happen, whether it's medical things from when they were a kid or a teenager or a young adult, or family trauma, family drama. If you are going to be there and help people, they're going to suck some of your life away. And it is a giving season right now between, Thanksgiving, Christmas, the holidays, and there's a whole lot of people asking for money, which can stress people out when they don't have money to give. But the idea of your life is a sacrifice, and this is definitely from Romans 12, like your life is a living sacrifice, and it is to be poured out like our Savior's blood was poured out for us. He poured out his entire life for us. So we are supposed to pour our life for others. It's not supposed to be, well, you can do tax advantageous things if you get a property here for 2%, and then you leverage another loan for this at 4%, and then you have something that makes you 8%. This is what you can do. And then you can just, make money off of everybody who in between and not have to do as much. And then you can take all that money and give it to your kids, so your kids don't have to work. So they're going to be millionaires by the time they're 25. And then they can make money faster by buying your real estate, and you can step up in basis and all these other rules, and you can just play the system. And then you don't have to worry about anything. And then you can be wealthy, and then make a class and sell people your class. And all of you are doing the same thing. None of you are giving this copious amount of money you have away to people who need it around you. You're moving into environments where people don't need it, where you can still compete. and where you can continue to buy up cheap property, flip it for yourself, and you're telling me that, hey, you can do the same as me. Who says character-wise I want to be the same as you?
Mm-hmm.
Who says character-wise I don't want to be, little old me?
Mm-hmm.
What if I think my character is better than you because you're too busy to help people move? You're in Bora Bora for the 4th time this year. I think those are questions we don't ask the uber wealthy around us because they can write a check that's more valuable, it seems, than us volunteering at the local soup kitchen.
Well, and I think to what we were saying earlier, because if I can just drop 10 grand on a charity, that's a tangible result.
It feels
like we were talking about the small things versus the big thing. The big thing is that guy's been doing who knows what and made, stupid amount of money and wants a tax write-off and he dumps it, at a local charity. But the small step is the person who shows up and is like cleaning and picking up and organizing events or whatever. And that person who drops the big check is like what we talk about versus, the one showing up week to week to week to week.
It used to be a thing where all the schools and universities are named after people, where because those people, once they got a certain amount of wealth, were like, oh, we're going to give it all back here. We're going to give all this here and all this here. And now places are looking for things to name after people sometimes. It's a weird thing that we're in. And it's hard because we do know if we're running a charity, right, that having someone show up every week for the 2 hours they show up compared to somebody dropping a 10 grand check, it would be really nice to get a 10 grand check. But if I had 500 people given 2 hours a week, I probably wouldn't even need the 2 grand check. So it gives a lot of structure and power to that. I think the last thing that I wanted to mention in the question section before getting into some passages, since we're sort of moving in that direction, is we're focusing on George a lot because George is the main character. But one thing I want people to remember is the town. And the town, if you treat it like the Israelites, and George, he's not God, like God, there's a different perspective you can have. Somebody who has been there for you all the time. Somebody who's been faithful for you, who's helped you build your houses, your families, your communities, who's protected you. They do one thing you're not really sure about, and it feels like everything's going to cave in on itself. And instead of thinking about what can I do to help fix this, immediately you go and be like, this is your fault. This is all on you. How could you do this? And everybody yelled at George, right? Now, George is not God, so he had this movie we can thank for. But I want us to remember that as Christians, that like the people of Israel, we turn our back on God sometimes and he doesn't do what we want to, even though he's been faithful for a really long time. He's been faithful forever. And to remember the townspeople as a character a little bit as well, compared to Mary and his family and where they were all the time being faithful to him. That's something that you just think about. We framed it over George. There are many characters you could frame stories on. And that'll help us as we transition to our theology section. So let's get into it. All right. Josh, I'll let you kick it off.
Will do. So, similar to what I said with my message of encouraging others, 2 passages that I put up are really books, are 1 Timothy and 2 Timothy. So, if you read through these, a lot of it gets kind of gnarly, and Paul is talking to Timothy, trying to encourage him in different skills. But at numerous points during both of these letters to Timothy, Paul is saying, like, I'm so thankful for you, and I'm so thankful for your genuine faith. And there is this encouragement in this letter. So Paul is not writing a letter to read Timothy the riot act. He's writing him to encourage him to keep doing the things that he trained him to do. And there's this like beautiful pupil mentor relationship that you can kind of see between the two of them. So that's 1st and 2nd Timothy. And then this is just one of my favorite passages that I go to, especially like when I'm freaking out about everything and struggling with thinking that I have enough imagination to picture where life is going, is Isaiah 55. So it's just that really hard-hitting reality that however real our feelings are, which you should not ignore your feelings, but just putting them in a proper context, that God's plan and the work he does in and through us is way beyond our senses of comprehension. And so when we know that God's this is the passage where God, it's, your thoughts are higher than my thoughts. And so when I think of like George and his struggles, or I think of me and my struggles, there is a level where I have to surrender my willingness to understand and try to like force things to happen. And yeah, and just, trust the small steps and trust the process.
Yeah, I was thinking about getting a rain poster from that passage. It says that God's word goes down like rain; it will not return to Him without achieving what it's accomplished. Is really, really powerful. I think Isaiah 55 is good if you're somebody who needs like a little bit of a sort of a hug and a reminder, comfort.
Yeah.
Similarly, to remind you that you're not the only person who feels like you do. Job chapter 3 is after all of Satan's attacks have started happening to Job, and he curses the day of his birth, just like George wishes he'd never been born. And I feel that without knowing that the movie is trying to be very Job-esque or Christmas Carol-esque, that's really spot on the nose of what they try to hit on. Job 38:4 is my passage of comfort because it humbles me when I'm going through something hard. It makes me realize, as much as I am important and critical, and God created me and knit me together and wants me to accomplish things and created works for me to do, that I was not there at the beginning. I was not there at the beginning. So how do I know what's being done? I think if everybody goes back far enough, if you're a survivor to exist today, you can probably find a relative of yours who did something that was not good. Some people, unfortunately, don't have to go back very far to see a relative that did something that was pretty gnarly.
Yeah.
Some people have to go back a little bit farther, but all of us have somebody in the past, probably, that we could be ashamed of, and reminding ourselves, like, my high and mighty position is nothing to who was there at the beginning. So John 5, the pool of Bethesda.
Yeah.
There's so much I could say about John 5, but the pool of Bethesda where a man is sitting and can't get up, and then Jesus is asking, like, well, do you want to be healed? And the man's answer is very weird, but he says, there's no one to help me. When the water stirred up, there's no one to help me. And it's just a question that we should ask ourselves when things seem like we're going to be stuck for 38 years. Josh isn't 38. I'm not 38. I can't imagine sitting for 38 years somewhere. And where do I look to? Where do I call out to?
Yeah.
Where do I look for help? Who helps me? What's that time like? And then to what God uses for good that we can't understand. I could pick Joseph again with all of his life and the things that he went through to become second in command. But the book of Ruth, and Ruth, we've been reading a children's Bible at night to the kids, and remembering that this mother who lost both of her sons and her husband and had one of her two daughters-in-law come back to her, right? Stay with her, love her, trust her, be with her, provide for her. Got to marry her relative. And in marrying her relative, Boaz, they had Obed, who's the father of Jesse, who's the father of David. And that woman, Naomi, we would not know her name otherwise, right? Like, why do we know anything about Ruth and Naomi after that tragedy? And there are people who have lost family members and people, and unfortunately, like many people, children, and they think this is life. And Naomi says, don't call me Naomi, call me Mara, or bitter. She's also beset by pain. And just remembering the promises that God works through these things of having family restored over time is just on a different timeline than we think. And that's hard. We're not good being by my time. So that's some biblical encouragement. Yeah. Read the book of Romans too, because just Romans is all good for your theology.
It's good. It's dense. It's dense as all get out.
Dense.
Yeah, but it's good.
So cool. Josh, any last thoughts that you want people to take away with? And you can even pick, like, for an artist, for a parent, for a student.
Actually, I will shout out so Kim Schill, she did some design work for us. She just reached out to me yesterday. She has a new site promoting her
let's
artwork
go.
called itcan'tallbetacos.com. And so she has all these really fun, very painterly digital paintings of like tacos. So there's like a cat and a taco, and it's very cartoony, or there's like Space Void taco, and it's very cool. So Kim did a whole bunch of work for us over the summer, and we're really thankful to her. So I just want to shout her out and all the cool stuff that she's doing. So I'll have the link in the description. I think she just launched her Printful store. So if you have someone who really likes tacos, this is the perfect like Christmas store to order from. Otherwise, be on the lookout. We have kind of like an end of the year wrap up with some surveys and stuff that we're going to be sending out before the 31st, just to kind of get feedback, so we can go into the new year improving and just seeing where everybody's at, and you know what we can do to maybe bring more people together as a community, or just see what this can look like. And so we will make sure that will be another post in our stream, so keep your eyes open for that. Otherwise, thanks for listening, thanks for tuning in, and that's really all I got.
Yeah, thanks for the time today. Thanks for the support, people. Peace. This episode was produced by Josh Erickson, Josh Cook, and Femi Shokoya, and edited by Josh Erickson. Our social media producer is Colton Mefford. We are currently self-supported. You can check out short stories, merch, and highlighted creators at parablearrows.com. You can also find us on Instagram and TikTok at Parable Arrows, or support us on Patreon. Thank you for listening to the Parable Arrows podcast. Think, move in faithfulness, and trust God. Pull back, aim high, let it fly.